Hi everyone, and welcome to the final day of the Distress Crayon series. I know that many of you have liked it, and I hope that you've become inspired by the cards that I've done with the crayons themselves. I know that it's a little bit different than what I normally do, but I like to push myself creatively and just use different products. So today I'm using a black piece of cardstock, and I die cut that out of a Simon Says Stamp stitched rectangle die. And I'm just using these crayons. You can see I'm just drawing random little circles on them. And I did a couple colors at a time, but you don't want to do too much because otherwise it makes it a little bit harder to move the pigment on your paper. So I'm just taking my finger and then blending that out, and it's going to create this really awesome bokeh effect. So that's one of the cool things about these crayons that's different than any other Distress product, is that you can use them on a black cardstock. Obviously you can use the paints on a black cardstock, but it's completely different and it has a completely different look than the crayons. So you could also use these on a stencil, with a stencil over the black cardstock, and create your own pattern if you don't want to do it freehanded like I'm doing it. But I'm going to cover this entire thing with little circles using the different colors. Again, I have the Brights pack, so that's the colors that I like to use. I always prefer brighter colors when I'm working with cards. So I'm again taking my finger and blending that out a little bit, and that's just going to soften the edges and really make it look like a bokeh background. And if you're not quite sure what a bokeh background is, you can always Google it, but it's just kind of like those little, usually circles, kind of in the background that fade out. So I'll just keep adding those, and you can see I am overlapping some of the colors because they kind of blend really well together. And then the cool thing about the Distress crayons is that when they dry, they are permanent, so you can build these colors up one on top of each other. You just want to give it a few minutes in between each color to let it dry completely. So I'm adding one of the final colors. I have the lime green, that's the Twisted Citron, one of my favorite colors of Distress inks. You could also add a little bit of water, but you just want to make sure that when you add water to a cardstock that's not watercolor cardstock, you don't add too much, because otherwise it's really going to affect your paper and it's really going to warp it. I haven't seen a black watercolor paper before. I'm not sure if there really is one, but you could definitely use that if there is such a thing. It would work a little bit better if you're going to be adding the water with the crayons. So it's my final color is the Mermaid Lagoon. And again, like I said before, I'm keeping these cards pretty simple just so that you can get to know the Distress inks and the different properties of those. So I'm going to create a really subtle background. I have a white piece of cardstock, and I'm taping this off because I'm going to layer a stencil over it, and I don't want to get the embossing paste on the back side of my card base. So I'm using my nonstick craft sheet and a piece of washi tape, and then I have the extra large dot stencil from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm also going to adhere that down. And then I'm going to be using the clear or the translucent embossing paste because I really want to create that subtle background. Like I said, it would definitely work with white since the cardstock is white. It would still create a subtle background, but the cool thing about the translucent is that it's shiny compared to a matte white embossing paste. So it's just a little different look. This would also be really cool if you tinted that embossing paste a little bit using some Distress inks. You can create a little bit of color in the background, especially if it's one of the colors that matches those Distress crayons. So I'm trying to get a smooth coverage over this. And then I can go ahead and pick up my stencil, and you want to make sure that you clean off your craft mat and your stencil right away. You don't want to let that embossing paste dry on there, because otherwise you're going to have a really hard time getting it up later. and I just set that aside to dry completely. One way you know when your embossing paste is dry is that if the back of it is not cool anymore, because your cardstock will be cool on the back when there's wet embossing paste on there. So I have this Scripty Thinks die from Paper Smooches, and I die cut that out in white. So I'm going to use my multi-matte medium just to add a little bit of adhesive to the back, because I'm going to add this white piece onto that bokeh background. I just add little dots of the adhesive. You don't need very much. You could also use a Xyron sticker maker. It makes it a little bit easier because then the entire background of that die cut is covered. So I'm going to place that down towards the bottom of that black cardstock with the crayon on it. Just make sure it's secured, and then I'm going to add my 3D foam squares from Best Creation to the back, and my embossing paste card base is completely dried at this point. So then I'm going to go ahead and place that right in the center. And I know that the embossing paste is hard to see on there, but you can see it in person, and it just creates a really cool, subtle background. And the final step, I'm going to be taking this Wink of Stella glitter pen and just adding glitter to that Thanks die cut. That'll make it really sparkly and shiny, so that kind of stands forward on the card. You could also use like the Irresistible, the clear one, so that it has a little bit of that glossy accent type look to it as well. And then that is my finished card. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this crayon series and got some cool ideas from it. If you already have the distress crayons, or you can go to my blog and win them. I am giving away a set, so make sure you head on over there to enter. There's a link in the description, and I will see you back here next time. Bye!